favorite teachers. And as I'm telling you this, I want you to be thinking of your favorite teacher growing up as well. So Mrs. Wilson was my 6th grade teacher. And she was one of my favorite teachers. And I want to tell you some of the things that I remember about her. And mind you, this is decades later. I remember that she smiled a lot. I remember that she was fun and engaging. And I'll give you a couple specific memories. I remember going in for my 6th grade conference and looking over my report card. And I specifically remember when we were looking at the spelling portion of my report card, because it wasn't very good. Like, I figured it out, but it was, and I remember the message that she sent to me. She said, hey, have you ever seen those crayons that you use in the bathtub? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, what if you practiced your spelling using those? And the 6th grade me was like, yeah, I can do that. But what was her message behind it? I'll get there. You can learn this. You can do this, right? I'll give you another Mrs. Wilson story. There was a student one day at recess that he was treated in a way that was less than he deserved by some of our classmates. And it was observed by some of our other classmates. And when we got back into our classroom, she let us have it. And what was the message behind that?
Not okay.
It's not okay. Say it again.
I expect better.
Yep. And for me, it was, I got you. I'm not going to let anybody in this class be treated in a way that was less than they deserve. My last story that I'll share about Mrs. Wilson, and then I'll give you an opportunity to think of your favorite teacher, is we had these journals, and this was the 80s. So my journal was like neon with like a black overlay with square cutouts. Like, it was rad. It was cool. And we could write journals back and forth to each other. And I remember writing to her about a very real problem for my 12-year-old self. I was the tallest girl in the 6th grade. I was this height when I was 12, and I remember feeling different and awkward and writing to her about it. And I have no idea what her response was, but I remember how she made me feel. And she made the 12-year-old version of me sit up a little bit taller and not feel so awkward and not feel so different. So that's my story of one of my teachers that I remember decades later. So now I want you to take a moment to think about, well, who is your favorite teacher? What are some memories that you have of them? And what were the messages that they gave you as a student, as a learner? All right, turn and talk.
I remember one specific teacher who just, she had like this, we could game these coins and she called them. I was so like, if you did a job, you could, so like clean the erasers. This is back when erasers people.
Yeah.
You clean the erasers, you were like 2
Oh,
and
I got nothing.
we all behaved and we could
the random stuff that the teacher would acknowledge
I'm eavesdropping, but that's key, right? Because that's how we bond, that's how we connect. I remember as a new teacher thinking like, is it okay that I'm talking about myself? Like, and then I realized like, that's how we connect. And I'm saving myself a lot of trouble down the line with classroom management if we make those connections.
Yeah.
Thank you for not talking as I came closer.
Okay.
The ones who are grumpy and didn't seem to enjoy their job, they're just kind of running out the clock.
This is the littlest teacher I've ever met.
I know, I'm so distracted.
Look at that hair.
Well, it doesn't sound like it.
Sounds like there's miscommunication. You don't need to sign up.
Huh?
Student services, we were asked to come.
Yeah?
We're always asked to be here for the domains,
Okay.
but it doesn't sound like we're needed.
I didn't. Am I on?
Yeah.
I got it on my. Give you like 1 more minute to wrap up your conversations.
Without having to worry about writing it. Remember, I was telling a story to her, and it really was a wandering, stupid story. It was really not going anywhere. And she was just still listening and writing it, and I'm like, so great. Because any other teacher would say, well, that's enough of you.
All right, show me 5. Let's just have like 2 share outs. Who can share out? What was something that you remembered about one of your favorite teachers? We've got some singing in the background. I heard you talking. Come on.
High expectations of me.
How did they let you know that?
Well, the amount of homework as a high school teacher, and 3 of his walls were covered in chalkboards, and he would have like 1-inch writing with those chalkboards full, and we were expected to copy all the notes before we left each day. And I remember at the beginning of the year being like, this is horrible, and that's by far my favorite course I ever took, and I learned the most from him.
Nice. Let's get another one. One more. Come on.
The teachers that always stood out to me were ones that had high expectations for behavior and, like you said before, how you treat others. Because I think it's more common to find teachers who have high expectations for academics, but not necessarily for how you treat other people. So
Yeah.
it's always nice.
We were talking because my teacher was the same one. Not the same teacher, but I mean, she showed us how it was okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
She was not the world's greatest speller.
Me
I was
neither.
in 4th grade, and there was always this girl going, "That's spelled wrong," and she'd say, "You're right. How would we spell that?" And I thought, I just loved her. I said, "An adult who admits mistakes." It's the first time I ever saw it.
Nice. So when students remember their teachers in years later, oftentimes it is for their skills in Domain 2. And so that's what we are going to be talking about. And we got lucky because this is like the best domain. We were talking to another principal about it today. He was like, that's my favorite one. I'm like, I know. That's why we signed up for this one. So Domain 2 is the classroom environment, and it's about the heart of the teacher. In a nutshell, if I had to synthesize the whole rubric for Domain 2, it would be about relationships, high expectations, classroom management, and responding to misbehavior. So tonight what we're going to do is I'll give you an overview of Domain 2, then we're going to spend some time in the rubric, and we're going to be doing some self-reflecting, thinking about our strengths and areas for growth, and then hopefully having some coaching conversations as well. So let's dive into Domain 2, and we're going to go through each component of Domain 2. And the items that you see bulleted are what you would see in a distinguished teacher's classroom, all right? So the first element is creating an environment of respect and rapport. And this is all about relationships. And I think there's actually a word that is missing from this part in the rubric. And the word that I think this is really, really about is love. And love is something that we don't talk enough about in education, but it's what it's really about. It's love for our students, love for our families, love for our colleagues, love for learning, love for our schools. I heard a quote once that love is the selfless act of developing others. And if that is true, then our schools should ooze with love. We have to bond, connect, and I would even say love our students. So in a distinguished teacher's classroom, you will see that teachers and students learn that respect runs both ways, and it's earned. Our interactions with students matter. Remember, kids don't learn from people that they don't like, right? So then how do we do that? How do we connect with someone? I heard a great example over here. What's one way to connect with students?
Telling personal stories.
Yeah, we have to establish those connections, and one way to do that is to hear their stories and learn about their lives, and to share about ours as well. We also want to make sure that students are encouraged to develop his or her gifts. Each child is helped to recognize and develop his or her potential, and students are encouraged to dream. I heard lots of you say, like, my teacher cared about me. They believed in me. They knew the things that I cared about, and they helped me grow in those areas. And the last is the distinguished teacher may even teach a child how to live. So I'll show a clip on what that might look like. And it's cut off, so hopefully it'll come up.
Death straight in the eye and told millions of the
See
rest
volume?
what he saw.
Not in denial, but I don't see any reason not to enjoy today and tomorrow and the next day. I mean, yeah, I'm going to die soon, but as Buzz Lightyear would say, not today.
Randy Pausch died Friday after a 22-month battle with pancreatic cancer. A professor of computer science at
So powerful, right? And again, the message behind it is that we need to have relationships with our student, make sure that we bond, connect, and even love them. So the next is 2B, and 2B is about establishing a culture for learning. And that's making sure that we're communicating that, one, we're all learners. Like you gave a very specific example of that. It's okay to make mistakes, and the teacher corrected it and was a learner along with the students. And it's believing that all children can and will learn. So 2B is establishing a culture for learning and helping students have pride in their work. They feel safe when they're unsuccessful and confident that they can and will improve. And part of this is creating a culture for risk-taking as well. How do we make it safe for students to try and fail? I'll give you one of the tips that I used with students. I tried to remove the word but from my vocabulary, and I switched to and. So when I was giving a reader feedback, I would say, you know what, you did something that was absolutely brilliant. You used the first part and the last part of the word. That's what readers do. And I want you to use the middle part to help you too. Watch me. That's a lot different than you use the first part of the word and the last part of the word, but, right? It's like, oh, you were right, but you were wrong too. So I try to not use the word but and use the word and in place. One thing that will help you remember that is no big buts, right? Nobody wants the big but.
I'm gonna step in.
Yes.
Close to her since she's got the microphone, so don't go too far away.
Oh.
I've actually chosen to do the same thing. So, and I have to continue to work at it. So one of the things that I found is the word but in a sentence negates everything that you say in front of it. I really like your shirt, but, okay? So all of what happens after that word, I mean, it's a causal part of our language, and I want you to think cautiously about it because I too, in the role, and it's interesting that you reflect on that, and that's why I had to pop up and do this, because I have to constantly work at it, because it's one of the things that's natural for us to think about what the negatives are, and we try to frame the positives by doing positive first and then a negative, okay? When you do the word and, twice as powerful, and it doesn't come across as a negative. So just think about that in the aspect of our work as well.
Yeah. All right, the next piece in domain 2 is students demonstrate, so in a distinguished teacher's classroom, students demonstrate curiosity and attention to detail, valuing the content's importance. Students take pride in their work and initiate improvements, and both the students and teacher establish and maintain appropriate interactions to maximize the highest level of learning for all students. And the teacher is encouraging the student to be successful. There's a clip there, but I think due to time, we'll skip it and keep going. All right. 2C is managing classroom procedures. Do you ever walk into a classroom and it's like magic? It just seems to run itself. You're like, wow, how does that happen? Strategically. It happens because the teacher set it up. Like, how many of you use the responsive classrooms the first 6 weeks? You can save yourself a lot of time across the year by setting up those systems, structures, and routine intentionally at the beginning of the year. So in a distinguished teacher's classroom, students are rarely surprised. Groups work independently and students are engaged. Transitions are seamless. Routines for handling materials and supplies are well established. And systems for performing non-instructional duties operate efficiently. And those three, transitions, routines, and systems, those are all things that we have to teach our kids how to do. And then guess what? When they come back in January, they forget. And so we have to reteach it again and again and again. And then on a Tuesday, for some reason, they forget again. And so we have to reteach it. Just because we do it at the beginning of the year doesn't mean we have to come back to it. Students assume leadership roles in the first of the 4 elements, and volunteers and our professionals make a viable contribution to the learning. So in order for this to happen, it has to be taught. Oh, where'd I go? Whew. Let's try that again. The next is 2D, and that's managing student behavior. And I want to tell you a story about this. So the very first time I was ever in front of kids, it was a first grade class, and I was going to be prepared. I was going to be ready, and so I went to my Madeline Hunter lesson plan, and I scripted it out. I had my anticipatory set, my objective, my demonstration, and then I memorized it. Because what could go wrong if I memorized my lesson and I was completely prepared, right? So I get in front of the students and I'm doing my thing and I'm remembering it. I'm feeling really proud of myself. And then these two students start to talk. And this student over here starts to spin around. And this one starts to lay on the floor. And this one just starts to sing, randomly sing. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I can't think about that and teach. And I remember thinking, like, how do teachers do this? How do teachers plan what they're going to teach and have all this behavior stuff going on? And what I was struggling with as a new teacher is just classroom management. And what I didn't know then is that teaching is responsive. We can go in with a great plan, like you've heard the like keep calm and pretend it's on the lesson plan, right? And that can be our agenda, but when we actually get in there, we have to respond to the little people in front of us. And responding isn't always easy either, but 2D is about managing students' behavior, and no learning occurs in chaos. So in well-run classrooms, you'll see some of these characteristics. Expectations are clear to everyone and posted. Expectations are consistently applied. There's no favorites. Teachers are aware of what's going on, and I would add to that, and respond to it. And students know what the responses are probably going to be. There may be reminding language or redirecting. It may be take a break, an I care plan, the buddy room. Like we have systems in place that students can kind of anticipate because we've communicated it to them as well. Any chastisement focuses on student behavior and not the student. And this is hard sometimes because there is a real human emotional element to this work. Like there is going to be some time in your career when you're in front of kids and you're going to feel frustrated. Or you're going to feel mad, or you're going to feel angry. And so my rule of thumb is when try to help yourself. Like when you get to that place, it's okay for you to go sit in the take a break chair too. Just be like, I just need to get my self-control, guys, before I can come back to the group, okay? But my rule of thumb is talk to kids the same way that you would talk to them if their parents were standing behind you. These are people's babies that they're trusting us with. We have 5 kids, and my last will be a kindergartner this year. And I said to my husband, I was like, how do we do this? Like, how do we send our babies to school and we just like trust people that they're going to love them the same way that we do? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm on the other side. I'm one of the people that they send them to. But it's just that constant reminder of it's tricky work. We have to be responsive. It doesn't mean we're never firm. It doesn't mean that we don't have serious conversations with kids, but we also need to talk to kids just like we would if their parents were standing behind us. The teacher encourages students to be responsible for their own behavior, and we refrain from losing our temper. No banging, throwing, or yelling. And it's interesting, in the book, I think it's from the book Daring Greatly, I would add no shaming to this list. 85% of adults report being shamed by a teacher. We have a lot of power. We're in that role, and what we do with it matters. Daring Greatly, it's a brilliant book. If you haven't read Daring Greatly by Brené Brown, it's phenomenal. And then her book after that is called Rising Strong. Daring Greatly is about being in the arena, right? And it's not the critic who counts. It's those of us who are in the arena actually doing the work. And part of Rising Strong then is when you're in the arena, you're going to fall down. There's going to be face down moments in the arena, but it's about getting back up. So great book. The next is component 2E. This is our last component, and that's about how you organize your physical space. Space is conveniently arranged and safe. In a distinguished teacher's classroom, the classroom is safe and students adjust the furniture to advance their own purposes. And both teacher and students use the physical resources optimally, and learning is equally accessible to all students. And the last piece that I'll share kind of as an overview of 2A, I keep doing that. Don't click the down button, it kicks you out of it. There we go. Is potential artifacts and elements. When you are having your pre-observation, your post-observation conferences with your administrator, one of the things that you can do is you can bring in artifacts. So what do artifacts look like for Domain 2? It may be copies of documents used to establish management procedures, diagrams and photographs of the classroom, rules directed at keeping students safe during instruction, documents indicating your rules and consequences for behavior, things that you've sent home to parents, seating charts, class schedules. These are all examples of artifacts that you can bring in to share with your administrator regarding Domain 2. So take 2 minutes to turn and talk. What is Domain 2A mostly about? Go. So give me a fist of 5 on where you're feeling with Domain 2. 5, I'm really confident that I understand Domain 2. 1, I didn't listen to anything you said and I really don't know. 3, I'm feeling okay. Where are you at with Domain 5 of my own formative assessment? Oh, I like the halves. That's creative. All right, with that, I will turn it over to Brian.
Hi. So, first, getting to know a little bit about our audience. How many of you are in elementary school? Okay, thank you. How many of you are early childhood? How many of you are at in secondary school at the middle school level and high school level? Any adult teachers? How many of you are in a classroom? How many of you are in a non-classroom role? Okay, so we all have different aspects of where and how we define that. And so one more question? Yeah.
How many of you are brand new? Like this is your true first year of teaching? Oh, I'm just sending you all like virtual.
All right. So as I think about this, Melissa's story, she shared about an impact that a teacher goes as broad as any adult in the school. And so for those of you who are not teachers, so there's some of you who are not teachers by profession, you're a critical part of the school environment. That includes nurse, social worker, psychologist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, counselor. So those are folks that are related back to our school system, and they're addressed as teachers within our teacher pool, but your domain 2 looks different than the domain 2 for classroom teachers. So I want to make sure you have your domain 2 in front of you. So would you pull up your domain 2, please? Couple places for you to find this. If you have the Danielson book, that is one of the places. That Danielson book in version 2 has moved or has developed enough to be able to have other frameworks as well as classroom teacher. So it was really built around that classroom teacher model. And one of the things that we've done within the Roseville schools with support of our student services is we've customized some of these. So on our website is one of the most up-to-date places to be able to get this. So on the for staff links under teacher development, you can find performance rubrics. And so that is where, as a supervisor, and we have our student services supervisor staff here as well today, where and when we're having performance conversations with you around domain 2, there are nuances of that that are tailored to your job. The way that Ellie is our school nurse who's here will do that job a little differently. But one of the very consistent words that's in there is rapport. So find 2A within your rubric. So my homework for today was to go back in and review many of the performance rubrics and frameworks that were classroom teacher and others. And that was one of the consistent things that I had seen was that word rapport. So I put the definition of rapport up here on the whiteboard because it's worth us talking about. And I'm gonna embed this into a story, which is one of the ways that we always know is effective for engaging our experiences. So Brian is who I am, and I started off as a student teacher at Little Canada Elementary School, and then I became a teacher there, a special ed teacher, subbing first, and then moved into long-term sub, and then I moved into LD and EBD instruction, so learning disabilities and emotional behavioral disabilities, and then I moved into classroom grades 5 and 6. And so Little Canada, I also happen to live in Little Canada, so my children have gone through Little Canada Elementary, Parkview, Roseville Middle School, and now are both in the high school. So I choose to embed my life and my family and my career all within the same environment. So I'm sitting over here at a little place called Gordy's. Anybody know Gordy's? Okay, personal, local, and immediate, right? So a nice little bar right up here that's been there for a long time. I'm sitting out there with my buddy Scott, who's another teacher in the district, and we're out on a nice summer night having a beer, and all of a sudden I hear, is that Mr. Coland? Is that Mr. Coland? So I'm sitting out having a drink, all right, in my community, which is one of the things that I really love to do. My past students are there. They're now drinking age. And they walked up to me. They're like, oh, man, it is you, Mr. Coland. I have a twin brother, too. So they checked, are you the real Mr. Coland or the other Mr. Coland? And so when they found out who it was, they came up to me and said, do you remember what you did to so-and-so? I'm like, I have not a clue. And so then they walked up to me and said, you had the best zone of proximal development I've ever seen. Right, so how often do our kids remember our instructional methodology? Do our kids know the instructional methodology that we wrap around them? That isn't what they said to me. What they didn't say was the Domain 3 conversation about what instructional practice do you use. They had a relationship experience with me. And it happened to be that I caught one of the kids forging his mom's signature on the Valley Fair permission slip, and I didn't let him go. Okay? That memory stuck with them for, 9, 10, 11 years after it happened. Okay? I didn't remember that. And knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have done that very same thing. But it goes to show you the power that you have when you have rapport and relationships. And how, when you think back about your own experiences within school, my hunch is that most of us have been successful in school. So I'm going to say that again. School professionals are typically individuals that have been successful in doing school. When you sit with parents that bring up their past experiences and children, when you're talking about difficulties and learning struggles, sometimes you're talking with individuals. In fact, many times you're talking with individuals whose parents had expressed experiences within schools. And part of one of the things that I think we might have missed along the way was the chance to build rapport. And I'll tell you that as I guide through this, whether it's a framework of PBIS or Envoy or whatever strategy it is that you want to be able to look at systemically, the number one aspect that I expect and that I want for our teachers is I want you to know your kids well. Investing time in relationships and knowing our children will pay off for you down the road. It'll pay off in Domain 2E when it comes to setting up your therapy room or your classroom or your counseling office with a procedure. So the rest of Domain 2 talks about procedures and how you live it out. But without this, and I'm going to read it because I think it's that important to be able to focus on. Because I'm pretty sure, let's do a check. Is there a rubric that somebody has here that does not have the word rapport in it? Okay, so our commonality, we're not all teachers, but we all interact in a public environment with clients, individuals, who are there because of the situations and circumstances within our society. So they don't necessarily choose to come to us. When I assign an individual to a classroom or when Ellie sees them within the nursing office, that isn't because that they've had the option to go there. That's because they're injured and I say, Ellie's the person you've got to talk to. So we're put around this scenario and circumstance, and when I do class assignments, I think about this. And the expectation that I have for me, because it'll make your job better. It'll make your experience better. And part of this, for those of you that are new to the field and those of you that have switched districts that you work for, is your longevity. And I will tell you that the investment that not only that our organization gives to you, but that we want you to have is we want you to work a long time within this district. And an aspect of you being successful, when you look at what is one of the number one pieces for attrition, it's because the job is too overwhelming and too stressful. And it's typically 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7 years, somewhere within there. And part of one of the reasons that I want to be able to embed along the way within my school and within my context is reinforcing, because it took me a while to get this. I remember sitting with my principal when I was doing just past my student teaching, and I said, I don't want to do character education. I have too much to teach. And he said, Brian, you're missing it. And he was dead on right. I was missing this piece that created for me the opportunity for a child to be open to instruction for me. You can have the best instructional methodology in Domain 1 around knowing your standards and your outcomes, and you can have them up there numbered and labeled within our 4-number system. And then you could have number 3, or Domain 3, which is the delivery system and engagement. You could have 90% of people engaged here. But if they don't have an emotional connection to you and to that material, the minute you're done with that experience, they're done with their learning. So a critical element is this, rapport, and we all have it within our context. A close and a harmonious relationship doesn't say easy. That's the other piece. So when I work with assigning folks as an individual class, I give you the shepherding responsibility around, these are the kids that I want you to get to know. Some of them are easy and they make you feel good about your work. I can tell you, and I love getting my bucket filled by a couple of kids when they give me hugs in the morning. 3 kids every day give me hugs in the morning. Fills my bucket. Now I have no difficult relationship with them. Anything that I'll ask them to do or guidance, they'll do it right away. It's the ones that don't fill my bucket. That's where it's a real challenge for me. And that's where it's a challenge for us in the profession. And that's where you've got a greater challenge, and I challenge you to really look for that harmony with that child. And it might mean a home visit. It might mean calling around something positive. I got an email today as I was sitting in our coaching conversation over at Fairview, and it was an email from a student who doesn't always fill my bucket, but he's a boy that in 6th grade, and he lets us know exactly what he thinks and what he feels. And his mom emailed me and said, "Missed the bus today. Can you come pick him up?" Sent it to me. I loved it because he wanted to come to school. And school is in a place where he finds an awful lot of success, at least within the academic. But in that piece, and I wished I could have been able to go get him, and that was the first time that they had reached out. And these are points and times when I've sat across from this family along the way and said, this is really difficult. One of the aspects that we're working through. But the more I invest, and the more I invest differently, not having the student conform necessarily to my belief, but me changing my approach to be able to go learn about the student, it's my obligation to build this relationship. So a close and harmonious relationship in which people or groups concerned understand. This was Melissa's story about her teacher. It's a vivid memory she has around somebody doing something that broke whatever those group norms were, which with each other's feelings, ideas, and communicate well. Now, each one of us has a different context into which we do that, a different time frame. But it is our job to be able to build that, and it is worth the time. PBIS, how many of you are in schools that do PBIS? Okay? One of the wonderful things about PBIS is it unveils this. It doesn't have any hidden rules. The purpose behind PBIS is to be explicitly clear about what it is that we're expecting so that I know it and so that students know it. And I'll tell you that I can't be in a relationship with somebody unless they know what to expect of me. And being in a principal, we're just in a conversation around coaching. I've made the commitment to the folks that I work with, and I think I've told Kim, and I haven't told Ellie yet because she just joined us. But one of the aspects that I say is we're all journeying together on this. I don't know my job better than anybody else in the world, and I have ways that I need to grow. So part of my rapport is with our collegial staff as well too. And in that way, for an administrative point of view, whenever I have a concern, I'll tell you about it right away. Because I want you to not worry and linger about it. Same thing with your kids. If your kids are worried about what they think you are thinking about them, they're not going to focus on their learning. So in thinking about rapport, it is the number one piece that comes in Domain 2. It is why, how many of your schools spent the first 3 weeks doing procedures and practices? Okay? All right, so that is one of the ways to be able to live out Domain 2E. And in fact, you can be not successful as a teacher, as an education professional, and you won't feel successful if you do Domain 2A, B, C, D, and E, which are the procedural aspects and managing behavior, because somewhere in your rubric is something about managing others' behaviors. And I'll tell you, you are never in charge of another person's behavior. You can influence it, you can punish it. Punishing, in my mind, doesn't change behavior long term. You can reward it, that changes behavior long term when you have a relationship. When your students know that you care about them, that's when you make a difference. That's when your instructional methodology really comes into play. Thoughts, questions? We also have the power of dinner too, so yeah, we don't need to hold that one over you much longer here, but thoughts or questions about rapport? So within the domains, I'm not going to spend any other time going over the rest of the domains in the rubric because they are job specific within your task. But rapport is one of the elements that's there. And we are in a public service organization. So it is our job, my job, to make sure that even the ones that don't fill my bucket, a nice way of saying that I don't always get along with everybody that comes in through my school experience, it's still my job to make sure that that experience is positive for that child. I disagree vehemently with some parents. And I'll tell you, it's okay to talk about it like that. The other aspect about this when it comes to teachers and now students as well too, I don't treat everybody equally. I acknowledge that. And as a classroom teacher, I acknowledge that as well too. I'm not going to treat you all the same. I'll treat you the way I'll treat you fairly, but that means that I'll treat you each differently. Because then it moves away from, well, how come you didn't do such and such for so-and-so? And then you turn around and say, that's because I'm working with this. And if they have a strong relationship with you, they'll give you that latitude. They'll know that that trust is there.
All right.
Yep.
Well stated.
Dinner time?
Yep. Let's do dinner, and then.
And this is PC Clymer, another supervisor. And I just want to make sure that people that are in student services have a clear understanding that all of the things that Melissa and Brian have talked about already, you will not find in your Danielson book. Okay? It's not in there because we have district rubrics for each of you. So please make sure that you go to the TDE website or wherever and can ask your mentor, but make sure that you have a good understanding of the domains. Because they are different. So for your specialty area. So I just wanted to reiterate that because I know some of you were kind of looking in Danielson like, where am I? And it's not in that book.
Can student services raise your hand, please? I'm curious. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And do all of you know where to find your rubric, or have you seen it?
Julie emailed a link to it.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. All yours.
All right, so you've heard a lot about domain 2. Now you're eating, and I get to be that presenter that's talking while you're eating, so this is going to be interesting, but we're going to make the most of it. Mr. Colin talked about rapport. In interview sessions, I heard responses from teacher candidates about the importance of relationships. And I would wholeheartedly agree that relationships matter. They're critical. But just like your own individual relationship on a personal level, relationships take work. They take work. So you never arrive in a sense. And so I would encourage you to keep that perspective in mind, that it is a work in progress. It's work in progress. Now, I've been asked a question about, well, how do you develop rapport and relationships? I've been candidly asked that question. How do you go about, or what is the process for developing a relationship? And I would say it's probably not a recipe, a one-size-fits-all for every relationship, but I would say being intentional is critical. Something that you have to work at. I come into every situation with a personal mission statement that drives my work. Children are building strong foundations, academically, socially, and emotionally. Well, if that's my drive, then I have to be intentional about how do I go about helping children build that foundation. One is listening. You all talked about, or you identified a teacher that had a positive influence or impact on your upbringing. Melissa talked about Teacher Wilson, I believe it was. Her 6th grade teacher. Whether it was Mr. Wilson, whether it was the teacher that you identified, they worked at that relationship, and I'm willing to bet they included some active listening. If you think back to your teacher preparation programs, that was probably not a course or anything you learned in that particular class or even in the program. When we talk about teaching is both an art and a science, we really focus on the science piece. And what you're hearing tonight is about the art piece. Like I said, there is no recipe for it, but be intentional about it. Be vulnerable, because with active listening and with working on a relationship, there comes some vulnerability with that. I am the classroom teacher, so therefore you should do what I say. You should follow my classroom expectations. As soon as you enter this room, Well, this is 2015, guess what? Doesn't work with majority of our students. It's a give and take. It's a balance. It is a dance. And students are somehow wired to test us. They truly are. I think it's in the DNA, maybe in the food. I don't know. But I do know that they test us. So when you think about the art of teaching, know that it is work. Okay? We have also a tendency to focus on the task. And Melissa quoted Dr. Rita Pearson early in her presentation. And she said that children got to like you. Children have to like you. Simple as that. Children have to like you. If I could actually reverse that too. As a principal, my teachers have to like me. It's one of my teachers. She laughed. Okay. Don't know how to take that feedback, but absolutely right. You want to get the video ready too? I recognize my teachers have to like me. And it sounds kind of superficial, but it is true. I have to have a relationship, and part of that relationship, that give and take, they have to like me. Because people learn from other people that they like. That's the other side of what Dr. Pearson states in her presentation. They don't learn from people they don't like. She also says that every child needs a champion. Every child needs to feel significant in your classroom. Every child needs to feel accepted in your classroom. And if they feel significant and accepted, they're going to feel like they belong. And if I belong in that classroom, then I see myself as a valued member in the classroom. I'm going to participate. I'm going to contribute to the classroom. We're going to close out with a video just to stay in the art of teaching and the relationship piece.
All right, and the quote that's on here is, every single person has at least one secret that would break your heart. If we could just remember this, I think there would be a lot more compassion and tolerance in this world. So remember that when you're working with your kids and with your families. Sometimes our kids that we love the most ask for it in the most unlovable ways. Stories too, and part of this work is connection and building those relationships and that rapport. One of the things that I'd like you to do as you leave tonight and you're driving home,